On June 25, 1950, the North Korean Communist Army, also known as the KPA, crossed the 38th parallel and traveled south, invading non-communist South Korea and their unprepared South Korean army, who were known as the ROKA. The ROKA retreated down to the southeast of the peninsula, around the city of Pusan. The first leader of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, led the KPA and quickly took over South Korea and its capital, Seoul. Hearing of this, General Douglas MacArthur and the United Nations forces came to the ROKA's aid. General Douglas MacArthur said, "I will defend Korea as I would my own country, just as I would California." These actions were the start of the Korean War. As an attempt to turn the tide of the war, MacArthur proposed a plan, codenamed Operation Chromite or Inchon Invasion. This plan was to have an amphibious landing behind the enemy line, invade Inchon at the west coast of South Korea, and cut off supply lines to weaken the North Koreans. Then they would be able to take back Seoul, South Korea's capital. His plan was met with much skepticism from other generals, but as MacArthur stated, "The only alternative to a stroke, such as I propose, will be the continuation of the savage sacrifice we are making at Pusan, with no hope of relief in sight. Are you content to let our troops stay in that bloody perimeter like beef cattle in the slaughterhouse? Who will take the responsibility for such a tragedy? Certainly I will not." It was finally approved, and Operation Chromite was underway. This invasion is a true demonstration of breaking through barriers in history, where both enormous odds were overcome and people united together. As South Korea retreated down the peninsula, the United Nations demanded that North Korea was to withdraw and return to the 38th parallel. When they failed to act in accordance with the demands, U.S. President Harry Truman agreed to send American forces into action. The Security Council also recommended that all UN forces stationed in South Korea be put under a U.S. commander, which General Douglas MacArthur was chosen for the very next day. In early August, the ROKA and the UN forces had been pushed all the way down to the southeastern corner of Korea, to the Pusan perimeter. People thought that they would eventually have to retreat into the ocean from the way the war was going, but with MacArthur's plan of Operation Chromite and the UN forces' aid, both the American forces and the South Korea forces as one were able to fight off the North Koreans' attacks and prevent themselves from being pushed even further down Korea. Without the help of MacArthur's risky but successful plan and UN troops fighting alongside ROKA, the war might have ended completely differently. The United Nations forces and the South Korean army united together to fight against the North Korean People's Army, thus breaking through barriers. The UN and South Korea faced numerous amounts of obstacles in their attempt to invade Inchon and successfully complete Operation Chromite.
Korea was a death trap, really.
Inchon has one of the fastest rising and dropping tides in the world, which made delivering reinforcements even harder for the invasion to succeed.
4 of my, I could say, fellow workers, fellow Marines, they died right in front of us, because Korea has the fastest dropping and rising tide in the world. They were building a bunker, and they thought that it would take the shortcut and come around the side, but through the water. As they were coming through the water, they didn't realize that this mud was really soft. They stepped into the mud with logs on their shoulders, got hung in the mud, tried to get out, and they could not get out.
Because of these dangerous and unavoidable conditions, the invasion had to halt for about 9 hours before additional troops were able to arrive during the next high tide. In this large amount of time, the possibility of enemy reinforcements nearby coming to attack was incredibly high. Fortunately, the first wave of attackers were able to hold off long enough for the second wave to come and help. And with more troops, they were able to drive further into Inchon, even though the extreme tides and long wait for additional troops. The United Nations forces and the ROKA overcame the enormous odds and broke through barriers in history. South Korea was very surprised when the North Koreans invaded them and had to hastily retreat southeast, down the peninsula. Fleeing for their lives, the people of South Korea were forced to abandon most of their precious belongings. Whatever they could carry is all they could keep. The KPA was taking over most of South Korea, and being in enemy territory was very risky. It was very common for the people of South Korea to be in danger of being captured and forced to fight for the KPA. They were even in danger of death.
서울에 왔다가 집에 갔다가 빨갱이들한테 잡혀가지고 그러고 있다가 이제 서울에 한번 서울에 볼 일이 있어서 들어갔다가 이제 집에 갔다가 이제 저기한테 붙잡혔어. 경찰한테 저기 이북 사람들한테 붙잡혀서 있는데 공수경보가 내리니까 이제 미국 비행기가 와서 막 서울 시내를 돌아다니니까 또 막 비행기에서 총도 막 쏴고 그러니까 사람들이 막 도망가잖아. 그래서 우리는 그때 딴 사람들은 다 이렇게 방공호 속으로 들어가는데 언니하고 나하고 둘이는 골목으로 도망가서 막 도망가가지고 피해갔어.
The South Koreans broke the bridge over the Hangang River in an attempt to slow the fast-approaching North Koreans. However, some South Koreans didn't make it across and were in danger of being taken prisoner. Most people suffered and died from starvation and thirst as well.
딴 사람들은 남았던 사람들 그 사람들이 먹을 것이 없어서 그들 고생했고 또 공습이 와서 이제 집들이 다 망가져서 우리 집이 완전히 망가져가지고 집이 없어져 버렸어.
These conditions made surviving so much more difficult for them. The invasion of Inchon turned the tide of the war and helped to weaken the North Koreans, thus allowing the ROKA and United Nations forces to pull back up and capture their capital, Seoul. Through all of these hardships and tragedies, the people of South Korea were able to hold out long enough for Operation Chromite to be completed. They prevailed over the very unfortunate circumstances and broke through barriers in history. When General Douglas MacArthur proposed his plan to invade Inchon, everyone thought that it would be impossible. His first plan, Operation Blue Hearts, had to be abandoned because of the harsh conditions of Inchon and the fast-approaching North Koreans. Commander Arlie G. Capps stated, "We drew up a list of every natural and geographic handicap, and Inchon had them all. Inchon has very intimidating natural and artificial defenses. That makes it difficult and almost impossible to have an amphibious landing at. The only way to approach Inchon was through two narrow channels, the Flying Fish and Eastern channels. But the problems were that the North Koreans could have blocked them by mines, and the current was dangerously fast, at 3 to 8 knots. However, to prepare for the approved landing, a joint CIA military intelligence team led by Navy Lieutenant Eugene Clark landed on Yonghang-do Island in the Flying Fish Channel to provide critical information. It was found out that the American title charts for Inchon were invalid and were able to be changed for the Inchon to be a success. MacArthur and the military forces broke through barriers by overcoming the huge odds of Inchon's natural defenses and successfully landing at Inchon's port for the invasion.